the fascia is the largest sensory organ in the body. It spans every single part of your body. It wraps every single cell, every nerve, every organ, all of your tissues from head to toe. And actually, if you connect to the fascia, you can get the most widespread association with what consciousness feels like because it's the unifying factor in your entire soma, the whole physical experience. So, first off, try to just connect with the feeling of an interconnected web or connective tissue matrix, which is really a liquid crystalline matrix like the DNA that spans your body from head to toe. Try to feel that there's like this kind of invisible, permeable, alive matrix that lives inside of you, that's within you, that's constantly moving and that's directing the activities of your cells, of your DNA, of the expression of your organs. And it's quite literally hugging all of these soft tissues and organ systems in your entire body. Try to connect to the feeling of actually allowing yourself to become the fascia. Because what that allows you to experience is like you're now unified with the unifying matrix of your entire being. And it's an exquisite feeling because to connect with the fascia is to understand really that's the conductor of all the biochemical processes in your body because it's that bioelectric structure. That's the unifying web of all of the other activities of your nervous system and everything else that's conducting your life force energy. So the fascia is responsible for also holding all of the trauma that crystallizes in your body as a kind of pattern of density. So the way that emotions live in the body is actually they're encoded in the fascia, which is this connective tissue matrix of collagen and structured water. It actually takes about 1/5 of your overall body mass. The 1/5 of your body is this sensory organ that most people have never even heard of, let alone think accounts for the storage of their pain, their repressed emotions, any traumatic imprints. And it lives as vibrational encoded information, which then begins to either lead to repression at the level of the energetic body, or it leads to the opening, which allows you to freely express emotions, energies, and everything that the chakra system is attempting to orchestrate throughout your field. So think of it this way. The fascia is like the matrix that's conducting the activities that you're already the receiver of as a vessel of consciousness. But you're also receiving all the time new information through new relational dynamics from your environment. Even this higher dimensional information, which we often speak to as part of what the universe is attempting to transmit through us as these vessels of consciousness. If you're, for instance, feeling these sorts of ascension symptoms that we've already been unpacking, like new energies flooding into your field, that might be leading to feelings of energy surges, or maybe the opposite. Maybe you feel like there's actually a depletion going on, because as this energy is attempting to move through the entire energetic body and the chakra system, it's attempting to open up areas of density. And that's where the fascia is still stuck in that survival mode. It's in a state of density. And that's what actually feels like somatic trauma. It's where you're still holding on. It's where there's constriction and tension, which can feel like any kind of lower frequency emotional state, be it fear or guilt or shame, or where you feel like you can't express yourself, or perhaps you're even just desensitized to feelings altogether, because that's where your fascia is still in a state of this blocked, constricted state, which is basically where presence and awareness is missing. So if we had to sum up conscious expansion or the evolution of the conscious experience in a nutshell, it comes down to connecting with yourself in such a way that you allow the presence to weave coherence and resonance back through your fascia to conduct openness and vibrational resonance throughout the entirety of the chakra system. The chakras then become these energetic portals that allow for breakthroughs and awakenings of energy and information, where the soul can now conduct through you because you've done the work to clear everything still stored as density within the fascia. And that then allows you to receive more elements of yourself, your subconscious mind, everything that your higher self is trying to impart into your field in every moment, which requires that you always stay, of course, open and let yourself really be in this position of transmission, receptivity, openness, and then also giving your energy freely. Otherwise, you might be creating more density. So see how we're always these intermediaries, processing these energies like a two-way street. But if the fascia is storing more than we are cognizant of or aware of, then we're going to be feeling like there's an impasse or something that we're not aware of that's creating a physical wall or an obstruction in the energetic body. And that's typically what drives people into a state where they feel either despair, a lack of awareness, or they might even have a sense that there's a dark night of the soul happening, and like they're losing awareness, or they feel like they're completely stuck. What's actually happening is they're being brought into the state of connecting to their own fascia, to the invisible architecture of consciousness and the geometry inside yourself. Because that's another beautiful thing about the fascia. It's totally geometric in nature. It's kind of like if you guys have seen my artwork and this sort of artwork that I have, this looks and feels like the fascia because the fascia is bound together in some areas where there's more information stored. But then when it opens up, it's more spacious, it's more fluid. It allows you to experience the dance of energy and the harmony, really, which allows you to experience synchronization and harmonization with new fields, to experience things like empathy and love and softness and compassion. And that feels like the reversal of any kind of traumatic survival state condition. So that's really the goal of everything that we're trying to conduct through our fields, especially as we're learning to receive these new energies, which allow us to experience a kind of openness and permeability to life itself in a way that might have felt unfamiliar for our nervous system in the past. And until we can hold space for that kind of openness and graceful flow, we're going to feel like there's something else that's manipulating our physical experience. So what I often see is people are aware that there's this tension in their bodies. There's constriction, or like there's some invisible force in them that they feel is the antagonist, and they're trying to clear that energy, be it the mind or the ego or whatever they think is leading to this impasse in their evolutionary journey. And they try to clear that through some kind of physical or emotional manipulation of the trauma or this density. So for instance, one of the very easy ways that you can start to manipulate the fascia into opening is you can get a massage, or you can get like craniosacral therapy, or just move in a state that allows you to allow the energies to flow and to feel a subtle release, which can feel super exhilarating because that's what the fascia needs to create a condition of that openness and warmth. And of course, humans are super susceptible to the response to touch and just feeling connection whenever somebody else is allowing them to feel safe, which can also lead to this fixation on needing somebody else to lead to your healing process. Be it a masseuse or a chiropractor or an intimate partner, we crave that feeling that somebody else can bring us the kind of softening and warmth that we need for our fascia to relax. Since, of course, trauma largely has to do with what we didn't receive in forms of connection, be it intimate connection or affection from parents or understanding or empathy. So we're likely holding on to density due to unmet needs and inner child wounding, which we're still looking to now fix through resolved relational dynamics. But the issue is that if the fascia is already in a state of that density and those trapped emotions are still in there, we're going to be manifesting subconsciously due to that trauma something that meets our state of trauma rather than the opposite. We have to literally stop this trauma in its tracks and learn to decode first, what is our fascia actually storing as that hidden message? We need to evoke this lovingly so that we don't repeat these patterns and end up attracting the same sorts of people that maybe led to our constriction in the first place, or feel like we need something outside of ourselves in order to fix these encoded traumatic programs. So that's the essence of the consciousness repatterning. We first have to actually understand what created those patterns in the first place, and then start to understand them in a way where we can create a new healed reality. And that allows the entire bioelectric architecture of our bodies to adjust. So the most simple ways to just honor the fascia at the level of the physical self is through deep presence, going within the self and actually learning to feel fascia as that part of you that conducts all of your conscious activities and behaviors. You can start to feel into the essence of oneness by just breathing with your own bioelectric circuit and going into a state where you're responding to what your fascia is holding. Most of us do unconsciously the exact opposite if we feel some kind of triggering reaction. So like if we're in a state of polarizing away from something in the environment, we're also polarizing away from ourselves. Because think of it, when most people go into a dysregulated state, they're then trying to deal with that dysregulation by creating even more of it. Like, let's say you're in a state of fear or discomfort, and then you start binge eating, or you start to distract yourself with something, or you're pulling for a joint or smoke in order to allow yourself to feel the relaxation. That's just forcing yourself to dissociate from the experience of what the fascia is actually responding to in that moment. If we can learn to not dissociate from feeling into those encoded traumatic patterns and instead go into them, then we can learn to accompany ourselves through the process of more than just a release, actually reprogramming the way these emotions are systemically playing out in our fields, and then attach new meaning to our patterns, to our trauma, and to everything that needs to be recalibrated lovingly instead of forcibly. Now, the physical state is just a response to everything that's been already bioelectrically encoded and everything that's psychosomatically stored inside you. And if you create a new way of even perceiving yourself as a part of your reality, your fascia starts to feel the safety. You create an atmosphere for the fascia to relax in because you start to reparent yourself to experience safety in a whole new kind of environment because you attach the higher spiritual context to your whole experience. And that leads to a regulation at the most holistic level, not just partially, but completely across all tiers of the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual experience. This is super important. And I want to give you guys an example of something that I think is going to be very helpful to just see the big picture in a way that makes it so important to honor the needs of your fascia and to really understand how everything is super connected. So I've been working with a client for some time now, this woman in her 50s who's been on a self-discovery path for many, many years. And she's very devoted to living in her truth and living in highest alignment. However, there's been some issues that she's been still trying to work through that have been very difficult to transmute because they've been deeply psychosomatic, very subconscious, and she's been facing them her entire life. One of these issues has been some excess weight, not too much, and not weight that's stored like obesity out of overeating or out of unhealthy habits. No, this is somebody very mindful and very conscious that's just trying to understand how to line up everything in her field so that there isn't some extraneous factor like some extra weight that she just can't understand why it's still present. So I've been working with her on really understanding the emotional connection between safety and the body and something like the fear of abandonment and excess weight, which is another very common pattern. People that feel a fear of abandonment clicking into their fields or sensing that they can't keep themselves safe and they're seeking somebody else to create that protection because it was relinquished at some point in the past, need food or need some kind of extra physical support to feel like their nervous system can relax. And so subconsciously, the body could be holding on to fat reserves, obviously as insulation and as emotional comfort, even if food doesn't provide that kind of dopamine release and they're not addicted to food for stimulation. It could be simply that the need to hold on to something for protection leads to leptin resistance, like the body's unable to get rid of extra fat cells because that cushion is literally subconsciously required as a condition to feel safe. So in the case of this woman, there's been so many different patterns that we've been working to unravel, and then she decided she wants to take the extra leap to expedite the process. And she went to her doctor and got a prescription for one of the common weight loss injections that are so popular today, one of the GLP-1, GIP receptor agonists. And she then came to me not to process the weight loss effects, but before those even kicked in, she started to experience a lot of very interesting metaphysical symptoms, which is not something that the medical community really talks about. In some cases, they just say these are side effects like nausea or, different patterns, some body aches, things like this, but they never translate this to something deeper. And she had a strong feeling that this was happening in conjunction with our work and her psychosomatic focus. So long story short, she started to experience such a purge at the level of her emotional body that she felt like she had COVID again. She had COVID in the past, and she had these very intense flu-like symptoms where she felt these body aches. And she started to feel not only these physical symptoms, but like her trauma was coming back online. So this is very interesting. Try to connect this to the context I just described about how the fascia is basically in between the organs, the physical system, and also the emotional, energetic body, consciousness. So she started to feel As some of these things for metabolic pathways were being basically rerouted, since that's how the insulin levels get adjusted with these weight loss drugs, she started to feel childhood trauma reappear back into her field. Almost like the trapdoor or Pandora's box in her subconscious was just popping open, and she started to retrieve these different memories. Kind of like a soul retrieval process started to happen. And she started to feel very intense waves of processing these depths and triggers, and actually becoming more and more aware that she's in a masculine state. This is a woman that knows what it takes to be feminine, to be sensitive, and to be a feeler and very intuitive. However, she started to feel like now she's kind of like fighting against reality or fighting against herself, because she felt those triggers that have been actually stored in her fascia coming back into the field, since that's what actually would need to be processed for her to lose the weight. I went down the rabbit hole with her because I thought this was so interesting, and it's not something that I've ever heard spoken about, how something like a weight loss drug that starts to reroute the metabolic pathways actually starts to make you aware of what led to the dysfunction in the first place. And she's been really processing how everything that she didn't know how to safely associate with in her childhood now needs to be associated with in a new way, for basically a new identity to be born through this process. And what's interesting too is with these weight loss injections, the weight doesn't get lost right away. It takes time, weeks, usually a month and a half or so, before the weight actually starts to go. Before then, the body is just starting to recalibrate. And it's during that recalibration phase that somebody goes through these massive mood swings and feeling different things arise, which allows them to instigate the psychosomatic shift, because that's where all that trauma is stored. Once the fat starts to be kind of alchemized into the fuel that can be burnt, when it's been held onto for so many years, you start to re-experience the cortisol that's in that fat. You start to remember everything that caused that fat to be stored in the first place. And she started to reawaken this connection to all these fears that she felt when the fat was being stored in her body. It's like so mind-blowing to think about, because she was never conscious of that connection up until this fascial release started to occur. And so, I've been telling her it's very important to be hypersensitive and attuned to yourself in that state, because that's typically what needs to happen for there to be the metabolic resolution. That has everything to do with the way that you associate with your energy, what your energy's for, and why you're really here. So if there's ever been an issue with the fear of abandonment or the fear of, not being safe, if you fully allow yourself to not have any kind of emotional cushion, then that's the new identity that needs to shape up. Safety in your own skin without needing to hold a buffer or barrier between yourself and your environment. And there's so many different psychosomatic symptoms and conditions that form because of that same subconscious desire that a lot of people have to shield themselves, including acne, including different kinds of inflammatory conditions, where people are literally generating like a wall of resistance in between themselves and reality because they're afraid of removing that wall. And that's precisely what's hidden in that fascial context. So I've also heard stories of people just naturally putting on weight when they deal with relationship issues and when they feel like there's something that can't be expressed, because that's an automatic manner of hiding behind some kind of insulation that you can create. Your free will gets put into, if not the emotional truth and expression of who you really are and what your consciousness is trying to conduct through you, then it's just going to be creating insulation, protection, or some kind of coping mechanism internally that lets you hide from what really needs to be expressed. But think of it, we have in us all along, like we always talk about here, all the information that wants to come through us. And that's that hidden code within every single chakra as this energetic portal that needs to be relieved when we let ourselves really sit with the tension that might be around these chakras. Because that's exactly where the fascia holds those traumatic programs. Literally around every single chakra where you might feel there's density or congestion. Like for instance, if you feel like your solar plexus is not refined in its ability to express your truth, and you feel this fear in your gut, or you feel like there's still shame there, then what you're actually feeling is not that the solar plexus doesn't know how to work. You're feeling the fascia that's densified around the solar plexus, literally in the walls of your gut, or in different organs, and in that membrane around, basically where your chakra center is. Same as in the heart chakra. If you feel like there's this tension in the heart, what you're actually feeling is the dense trauma, which was formed every time somebody made you feel extra in this world, or where you felt a shame of expressing yourself authentically, and you felt the pain of being heartbroken, or anything else that leads you to now undermine the importance of actually sharing your emotional truth with vulnerability and letting your heart open up again to receive and to be fully seen by others. So it's incredibly intricate to think of the orchestration of these activities within the fascia and the physical body, the emotional state, and then to add to this experience is also what the soul is trying to transmit through us at all times, which we can receive through the fascia, which allows us to then process new frequencies and a whole new state of resonance if we allow ourselves to hold this new kind of energetic information. So in order to let that happen, we of course need to let ourselves let go of everything that's still creating that schism or that split where we can't feel something new because we're still trying to preserve that past and the past identity, which is literally held within us as this tug of war of different frequencies and parts that can, really conflict with our true purpose here. So the shashumna, if we add this to the whole mix, especially thinking about fascia as this overall conductor of consciousness information in our fields, the shashumna is like the axis mundi. It's like that central pillar, which allows you to hold space for the activities of your entire harmonized energetic system. Think of it as this pillar that holds all of your chakras. And the chakras is these gateways between the biofield, this energetic field, which you can't see, but that actually encodes also the morphic information that allows for the body systems to operate in resonance, and then your physical field. So the shashumna can only be activated if you're already in a state of this resonance, which means that you cannot be holding density in the fascia for the shashumna to be activated. And to activate the shashumna means to be in a state where you permit harmony as a quality that comes into your mind and your emotional state and your physical body, which means as soon as you feel some kind of dominance, be it in the feminine or in the masculine state, or if you feel a proclivity to just be in a certain place, trying to control your consciousness or trying to do things from a more forced desire to dissociate from some experience, then that means you're not actually going to allow the harmonization to happen naturally, because that's what wants to come through consciousness. And actually, that's what's creating all of these intense symptoms many are feeling. It's like the innate quality of consciousness to restore itself and to repair itself. And that's the function of the fascia as well. So even when it's holding information and it's creating this density, which you might feel is almost this parasitic quality of fascia, or something that might be held against you, it's actually helping you to help yourself. It's allowing you to track exactly where this density is so that you can learn to recode it and learn to understand yourself and your purpose, because that's how the soul communicates with us in this vibrational manner. So in order to understand how to activate the shashumna, we have to first feel into what is not harmonized in the physical being, which comes down to what isn't harmonized in the emotional being. And then where do we feel like we actually can't achieve the harmony for some reason, which could be something external that we're still blaming for the energetic injustices we've been exposed to. So feel into that specifically, and you might start to see a real connection come through the inner child, specifically because the child in us had a free relationship with the fascia. And that's kind of the pre-state of fascia densification. When we're little, think of how open we are, how unreserved we are, how much we feel and how much we move. And really that childish energy, it feels like a relieving release of everything that we hold as density as adults that forget how to associate with this energy of aliveness and fully allowing for exploration at the level of the full energetic system. So oftentimes, in order to understand why the density has been created, we have to go back to square one and feel into where did we shift away from that default template, which doesn't mean becoming more childish per se, or forgetting all the lived experience. More just taking the lived experience and allowing ourselves to flow back into that initial state of fluidity, where we were open to how life force energy wanted to move through us before we felt like the world or anybody said no to that authentic expression. So that provides a really healing antidote to a lot of the restriction and reserved energy that a lot of people feel. Often we just need to give ourselves permission to flow again with our own flow, to follow new rules, to set a new kind of divine expectation internally, to allow for the release of anything that's weighing down on us, which is not an illusory feeling. It's like a literal weight that we're storing which can come through excess weight. It can come through emotional weight. It can be anything that you're holding in your field, which feels like extra material or karmic energy that doesn't allow you to fully breathe and to be yourself. And that's all very literally. So you can allow yourself to recode this by breathing into yourself more deeply and letting yourself just dive into these depths that others have not been able to see, or where you haven't been permitting yourself even to access the full range of your emotions and what your consciousness is permitting yourself to be and experience.